Ananya Sharma trusted her marriage would give her a new life, while Rayan al-Haddad had already decided it would end her old one. The wedding was presented as a miracle of destiny, the kind that families talk about for generations. The bride came from a modest Indian household where life moved at a careful pace, guided by routine, respect, and quiet hope. She was educated, soft-spoken, and known for trusting people easily. Her parents believed marriage would bring her stability and happiness, especially after years of financial strain. When the proposal arrived from a wealthy man based in Dubai, it felt like an answer to countless silent prayers. The groom's profile was impressive. He owned multiple businesses, traveled frequently, and lived in a luxury apartment overlooking the city skyline. His photographs showed expensive cars, designer suits, and gatherings in high-end locations. Relatives praised his success and modern outlook. He spoke confidently during video calls, assuring the family that he wanted a simple, respectful wife and a peaceful married life. He emphasized how much he valued family traditions, which immediately built trust. Everything moved fast, but no one questioned it. The groom explained that his work schedule was demanding and that delays would be difficult. The families agreed to a quick engagement, followed by an even quicker wedding. The bride had little time to adjust to the idea, but she did not resist. She believed her parents knew what was best for her. The idea of moving to Dubai sounded exciting, almost unreal, like stepping into a life she had only seen in movies. Preparations were grand, jewelry was purchased, invitations were printed, and relatives traveled from far away. The groom's side paid generously, reinforcing the image of wealth and generosity. He rarely appeared in person before the wedding, sending gifts instead. His absence was explained as unavoidable business travel. The bride noticed this but dismissed her discomfort, reminding herself that successful people lived differently. On the wedding day, everything looked perfect. The venue shimmered with lights, flowers, and music. The groom arrived confident and smiling, greeting everyone warmly. He barely spoke to the bride, but his polite manner convinced others that he was simply reserved. Photographs captured moments of ritual and celebration, freezing smiles that would later feel painfully deceptive. After the ceremonies, conversations revolved around the future. The groom spoke about Dubai as a land of opportunity, safety, and luxury. He described the apartment she would live in, the comforts she would enjoy, and the freedom she would have. He promised to take care of her health, her needs, and her dreams. The bride listened quietly, feeling both nervous and hopeful. What no one noticed was how little he asked about her wishes. He never discussed her interests, her plans, or her emotions. His focus remained fixed on timelines and logistics. Travel documents were prepared unusually quickly. Medical checkups were suggested even before she left India, explained as a requirement for residency abroad. The bride complied without suspicion, trusting her husband and elders completely. Within days, the celebrations ended and farewells began. Tears were shed, blessings were given, and expectations were set. The bride left her home carrying dreams of a secure future, unaware that every step had been carefully planned long before she entered the picture. To everyone watching, it was the story of a perfect match. In reality, it was the opening move of a crime disguised as destiny. Dubai greeted her with towering buildings and endless lights, a city that felt alive even in silence. From the outside, everything appeared luxurious and promising, but the feeling faded quickly. The apartment was large, spotless, and beautifully furnished, yet it felt empty and unfamiliar. There were no personal items, no warmth, and no signs that it was meant to be a shared home. The windows were always closed, and the curtains remained drawn most of the time. Her husband's behavior changed almost immediately. He became distant and strict, controlling small details of her daily routine. He decided when she should sleep, what she should eat, and when she could step outside. He said the city was dangerous for newcomers and that it was better if she stayed indoors. At first, she believed him. She thought this was how life was in a new country and told herself she would adjust. Days passed and loneliness settled in. He traveled often, sometimes leaving without explanation and returning late at night. When he was home, conversations were short and cold. He avoided eye contact and showed no interest in building a relationship. The promises made during the wedding felt hollow. She spent most of her time alone, staring at the walls or watching the city from behind glass. Soon her body began to change. She felt tired even after long rest, and sharp pain would appear without warning. She experienced frequent dizziness and nausea, making it difficult to eat. When she mentioned these problems, her husband did not show concern. Instead, he insisted she visit doctors he already knew. Appointments were scheduled quickly, often without her understanding why. The clinics were private and quiet. Staff spoke politely but avoided explaining procedures. Tests were done repeatedly, sometimes on the same day. She was asked to sign papers she could not fully read. Her husband stayed close during these visits, answering questions on her behalf. She trusted him, believing he was protecting her from stress. Her phone was slowly taken away from her. He said constant calls to India would delay her adjustment. Messages to her parents became rare and monitored. When she did manage to speak to them, she reassured them that everything was fine, hiding her discomfort. Her voice sounded weaker, but distance made it hard for them to understand the truth. Medication became part of her routine. Pills were given to her daily, explained as vitamins or treatment. She grew increasingly dependent, sleeping longer and feeling confused. Time seemed to blur. The apartment felt smaller, and the world outside felt unreachable. One evening, she asked to return to India for a short visit. The request was met with silence, followed by anger. He told her she was ungrateful and reminded her of the life he had given her. After that, she stopped asking questions. Her health declined rapidly. Bruises appeared on her body without explanation. Pain settled deep inside her, constant and unbearable. Yet she was taken to the same clinics again and again. No familiar faces appeared. No second opinions were allowed. Then, without warning, all contact stopped. Her family's calls went unanswered. Messages were ignored. When they finally received news, it came not from her voice but from his. She was gone. The city that promised a new beginning had become the place where her presence vanished, leaving behind silence, unanswered questions, and a truth waiting to be uncovered. The message reached her family in the early hours of the morning, delivered with shocking calm. They were told that she had fallen seriously ill and that doctors could not save her. No clear explanation was given, only vague medical terms and hurried reassurances. The husband insisted that everything had happened suddenly and that there was no time to inform anyone earlier. Grief struck instantly, but confusion followed just as quickly. He urged them to accept a quick burial in Dubai, claiming it was required and that delays would create legal problems. The request felt rushed and unnatural. Her parents, still struggling to understand how their healthy daughter could die within weeks of marriage, refused. They demanded to see her, to bring her back home, and to perform the final rites themselves. The refusal angered the husband, but international pressure forced him to comply. When her body arrived in India, the weight of reality became unbearable. The sealed coffin was opened in the presence of authorities, and silence filled the room. Her face looked pale and unfamiliar, marked by suffering rather than peace. But it was what lay beneath the surface that shocked everyone. There were fresh surgical stitches across her abdomen, clean and precise, nothing like marks left by emergency treatment. The family knew immediately that something was wrong. She had never undergone surgery before leaving India. There had been no mention of operations, only vague talk of weakness. Relatives whispered fears that grew louder with every passing minute. Against advice to move on quietly, the family demanded a full autopsy. The examination revealed the truth that would change everything. One of her kidneys was missing. The removal had been recent, carefully done, and followed by severe internal bleeding. There was no evidence of consent, no legal documentation, and no signs of proper post-operative care. Her body had been used and then abandoned. The claim of natural illness collapsed instantly. Authorities were alerted, and a criminal investigation began. Medical experts confirmed that the surgery itself had not been performed to save her life. It had been done to extract an organ. The bleeding that caused her death was not accidental, but the result of neglect. As news spread, the husband's behavior raised more suspicion. He avoided public statements and delayed cooperation with investigators. When questioned, his explanations changed repeatedly. He could not provide authentic medical records or name a hospital willing to confirm the procedure legally. The autopsy report became the turning point. It transformed private grief into a public case. Media attention grew rapidly, and pressure mounted on law enforcement agencies to act. The story shocked the nation. A newly married bride dead within weeks, her body altered in ways no family could imagine. Further investigation revealed traces of heavy sedation in her system. This explained her weakness, confusion, and silence during her final days. She had not simply fallen ill. She had been controlled, isolated, and prepared. For her family, every memory of the wedding became painful. Smiles in photographs now felt staged. Promises now sounded calculated. The man they had trusted with their daughter's life was no longer a grieving husband, but the central suspect in a horrifying crime. What had been presented as a sudden tragedy was now exposed as something far darker. The truth did not come gently. It arrived through cold reports, medical terms, and undeniable evidence. She had not died suddenly. She had been silenced after being used, and this was only the beginning of what the investigation was about to uncover. As investigators dug deeper, the image of a successful businessman began to collapse. Financial records told a story completely opposite to the luxurious lifestyle shown online. The husband was drowning in debt, with failed ventures and unpaid loans hidden behind rented cars and borrowed status. The wealth that impressed everyone during the marriage was largely an illusion, carefully maintained to attract trust and silence suspicion. Authorities traced his movements in the weeks before and after the wedding. A disturbing pattern emerged. He had visited multiple countries known for illegal medical operations. Payments were made to shell companies connected to private clinics, none of which appeared in official health records. These transactions matched the timeline of the bride's medical visits and sudden decline. The clinics she had been taken to were investigated next. Several had no permanent licenses and operated through temporary permits. Staff members disappeared as soon as questions were raised. Doctors listed in the records either denied involvement or could not be located. What looked like scattered negligence slowly revealed itself as a coordinated system designed to erase responsibility. Investigators uncovered that this was not the first suspicious marriage linked to the husband. Previous short-term relationships had ended abruptly, each followed by unexplained medical emergencies involving the women. In those cases, families had accepted official explanations, lacking the power or resources to question foreign authorities. Her case was different only because her family refused to stay silent. The network extended beyond one man. Middlemen played key roles, scouting vulnerable families through marriage brokers. Brides were chosen carefully, young, healthy, trusting, and unlikely to have international legal support. Marriages were rushed to reduce scrutiny. Once abroad, isolation ensured control. Medical consent forms were forged. Sedatives were administered under the label of routine treatment. The surgeries were performed quickly, often without proper recovery care. Survival was never the priority. Once the organ was removed, the woman became a risk rather than a person. Investigators found evidence of encrypted communication between the husband and organ traffickers. Messages discussed compatibility, timing, and transport. The language was cold and transactional. Human lives were reduced to inventory. The kidney taken from the bride had already been traced to a recipient in another country, sold at an enormous price. The scale of the operation shocked authorities. This was not a desperate act by one man, but part of a wider underground industry thriving on secrecy and loopholes. Wealthy recipients paid to bypass legal transplant waiting lists. Corrupt professionals ensured silence. Victims vanished quietly, their deaths disguised as fate or illness. As the case gained international attention, pressure mounted on officials who had ignored warning signs for years. Borders that protected criminals now became traps. Arrests followed, accounts were frozen, clinics were shut down. Each new discovery revealed how many chances there had been to stop this before another life was lost. For the bride's family, learning the full truth was devastating. The marriage they celebrated was nothing more than a contract written in blood. Every ritual, every blessing had been exploited. Their daughter had been selected not for love, but for her health. The investigation exposed a reality far darker than murder alone. It showed how trust can be weaponized, how tradition can be manipulated, and how crime can hide behind respectability. This was no longer just one case. It was evidence of a system built to profit from human bodies, and at its center stood a man who had turned marriage into a method and love into a lie. The arrest did not bring immediate relief. News of the husband being taken into custody spread quickly, but for the bride's family, justice still felt distant and fragile. Legal processes moved slowly across borders, tangled in paperwork, jurisdiction disputes, and delayed hearings. Every day brought new reports, new evidence, and new reminders of what had been stolen from them. International agencies became involved as the scale of the crime grew clearer. What began as a single murder investigation expanded into a major case against organized organ trafficking. Authorities linked multiple victims to the same network, uncovering stories that had remained buried for years. Families from different countries came forward, each carrying grief shaped by similar patterns of sudden marriages, mysterious illnesses, and unexplained deaths. The husband attempted to portray himself as a victim of circumstance, blaming doctors, agents, and misunderstandings. His claims collapsed under the weight of evidence. Financial trails showed direct payments. Travel logs confirmed coordination. Digital records revealed planning long before the wedding. The timeline proved that the bride's fate had been decided before she ever left India. Court proceedings were long and emotionally draining. The family relived painful details repeatedly, listening as medical experts described the final hours of their daughter's life. Each detail confirmed what they already knew. She had suffered in silence, surrounded by strangers who saw her only as a resource. Public outrage grew. Media coverage forced governments to confront uncomfortable truths about medical oversight and marriage-based migration. Laws were questioned, policies reviewed, and loopholes exposed. While reforms were promised, they arrived too late for the victims whose stories had already ended. The husband was eventually convicted, along with several members of the trafficking network. Sentences were handed down, assets seized, and clinics permanently shut. Yet the punishment felt small compared to the damage caused. No sentence could restore a life erased by greed and deception. For the bride's parents, the world had changed forever. The home she left behind remained untouched, her belongings frozen in time. Celebrations turned into reminders, silence replaced routine. They spoke publicly not for attention, but to ensure their daughter's story would not be forgotten or repeated. Her case became a warning shared across communities. Families were urged to question rushed marriages, verify backgrounds, and protect daughters sent abroad. Awareness campaigns used her story to expose the dangers hidden behind appearances of wealth and success. In the end, justice arrived in records and verdicts, not in peace. The system acknowledged her suffering, but it could not undo it. What remained was her story, carried forward by those who refused to let it disappear quietly. She was promised a future and given a funeral instead. She was chosen not for love, but for what could be taken from her. Her life ended after 21 days of marriage, but the truth she left behind forced a reckoning far larger than one crime. This was not just the story of a murdered bride. It was proof that evil can wear respectability, and that silence is often its greatest weapon.